What is it going to take? You ever heard anyone ask that? What is it going to take for Republicans in Congress and other conservative leaders to stand up to Donald Trump when you look at so many things that he's done that are against what they say they've stood for, some of them for their whole careers? Well, I can tell you tonight, it is official, the first Republican member of the House to formally defect from the Republican Party in the Trump era. And there's blowback that is illustrative of something much larger than any single congressional seat. I'm talking about someone you may have heard of. His name is Justin Amash, and he's a famously independent sort of libertarian congressman. He has now left the Republican Party. Tonight, it's official. He files as an independent, and he sends a notice to Republican leaders that he's, quote, withdrawing from the House Republican Conference immediately, forfeiting his seat on a key committee, and basically giving up some power within the party in exchange for trying to save his seat. It's a punctuation to where this all began. Amash, the rare member of the Republican Party, who read the Mueller report and said, hey, this is not okay. He made a call for impeachment hearings, an impeachment probe, and now in his first interview since leaving the Republican Party, Amash says all of this needs to be dealt with.
When I was discussing impeachment, I had fellow colleagues and other Republicans, high-level officials, contacting me saying, thank you for what you're doing. So there are lots of Republicans out there who are saying these things privately, but they're not saying it publicly. And I think that's a problem for our country.
A problem of obviously fear in the face of the Trump political era. Amash says all of this has turned into kind of a partisan death spiral. So he wants to declare his independence from the GOP. Political context, though, is broader. Even before defecting, there were reports that Amash would face a tough primary challenge because of his stance on impeachment. And so while many credit him for what he's doing, and it seems completely genuine, he also has to formally withdraw from the Republican Party now in order to ensure he can even run for a re-election under local rules to run as an independent. And this goes to the larger issue of how primaries work now to insulate Donald Trump, to basically be a weapon against anyone in many red districts who stands up against him. Remember Congressman Mark Sanford? He said Trump was nothing but trouble. He was ousted from his seat in a primary. Or Senator Jeff Flake, another critic of Trump. He didn't withdraw from the Republican Party, but he didn't run for re-election and admitted he couldn't win that primary. And that might explain why it's easier for some high-profile conservatives who don't have constituents to defect. Consider people who've left the party over Trump, some of them visible on television, people like George Will and Steve Schmidt and Max Boot, a former guest of The Beat, who accused the Republican Party of losing its values and saying, Schmidt said, look, this is not even an independent political party. It's just the, quote, party of Trump. I'm joined now by New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg and editor-at-large for Reason Magazine, Matt Welch. Good to see both of you.
Thanks for having us.
This does answer the question, whether it's at picnics or cocktail parties or any place people discuss politics, of both what it takes for Amash as a constitutional conservative. It was the evidence in the Mueller report, what it takes and what happens. He couldn't stay, he believes, in the Republican Party and criticize Donald Trump.
Well, right. I mean, you remember right after Donald Trump was elected and there was this feeling of incredible pervasive crisis, there was this Saturday Night Live skit about how Grateful Nation is waiting for, Republican TK to come out and do the right thing. And everybody wondered who that would be. In the Saturday Night Live skit, they're greeted with rapturous applause. In real life, they've basically been kind of consigned to the margins because of how much the base of the Republican Party. I think what we're learning is that a lot of these doctrines, particularly the libertarian economic doctrines that people like Jeff Flake, people like Justin Amash sincerely believe in, were at best embroidery for the ethno-nationalist resentments of the base of the party. That's what they're in it for. They're happy to jettison all the rest of it.
But isn't there also a wider thing about political loyalty? Because Bill Clinton had an impeachment issue. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
And Joe Lieberman went to the Senate floor and rebuked him and was very critical, more so than even some Republicans. And the Democratic Party responded in its leadership by Clinton's running mate making Joe Lieberman his running mate, and the Democratic electorate seemed to welcome this as a kind of a page turn. So is there something different here in the political culture of the Trump Republican Party?
I I think that Democrats in general are much more concerned with how they're viewed by the country as a whole. I mean, remember, the name of Move On, which is now one of the most famous progressive groups in the country, came out of what was considered the left response to the Clinton impeachment, which was censure and move on. There was no debate among the Democratic caucus.
You said something so important. Let me underscore it and get Matt's response. Michelle is pointing us out to a very basic piece of history, that the Democratic Party's position in the mainstream on Bill Clinton, its president, censure, was harsher than its position today on Trump, which is no impeachment, no censure in the main.
Although MoveOn.org would love to impeach Trump because everybody switches places every 20 years in American politics on some level. I don't necessarily agree that Justin Amash's or anybody else, or certainly Jeff Flake's sense of economic conservatism or constitutional conservatism was, from their own point of view, an embroidery.
Oh, no, I didn't say theirs was. I said theirs was sincere in the party, and we're now seeing that a lot of the base of the party kind of never cared about all that stuff.
Or they still think that they care about this stuff, but that's not worth losing their next election over. This is what we've seen. It's the Death Eaters moment of the Republican Party. What happens when your party is in power tells you everything. And the person that all Republican voters are keyed off to is Donald Trump. It's not Lindsey Graham's voters who think about Lindsey Graham every day. He realizes that they think about Donald Trump every day. And it turns out, like Mike Pence, like a lot of people who have said for years that free trade is important, that NAFTA is important, and all these kind of things, they can ditch all of those in a hot second and not have to worry about it. I think what Justin Amash does is he makes an institutional argument, and it's a good one. And this predates his calling for impeachment. It is that Congress doesn't do its job, period, right now. It's all whatever's negotiated with the Senate Majority Leader and the House Speaker and the President in most cases, and they kind of present a fait accompli, and you're supposed to vote at the end of the year in the big omnibus bill, yes or no, and that's it. And everything else is sort of a partisan scrum that you use to raise money off of. The whole thing is broken, and it's broken whether Nancy Pelosi is the head of the House of Representatives or somebody else.
You said omnibus. That's omnibus legislation that's mixed with a cronut.
Yes.
Which itself is a portmanteau.
Which you can get on Up with David Gura on Saturday morning.
Final thought, other than plugging Up, which is a great show?
You know, my final thought is that my friend Eyal Press wrote this great book about people who break ranks, right? Why some people are sort of willing to reject a corrupt institution and other people go along. And what he found is that it's often the people who are true believers who are the ones who kind of can't abide corruption and compromise because they really believed in it all in the first place. And I think that's why you see people like Justin Amash, people like Jeff Flake, people like Mark Sanford. These aren't the moderates. These are very, very conservative men who actually took all this stuff seriously. Right. And I think we're seeing how few people in the Republican Party took that Tea Party ideology seriously. That's
a great point, and you've written in ways that I think people know where you stand, but you're actually crediting what is genuine views, that sometimes it's the people who are even more conservative, but in a genuine way, that are beefing, and the other folks who appear to just go along with anything. I mean, Ted Cruz, stood up to all of this up until he couldn't, and now doesn't at all. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.